good lawyer to me is someone who is intelligent, um, caring, and has high integrity.
Personality has so much to do with practicing law. And it, the law uses all of your personality and um, all of your brain.
It was the idea of helping people. I just thought it would be wonderful. I mean, a law degree can do so many things for you. And I just really wanted to do it. And
thus, I think a lawyer as a professional has a much larger responsibility than the day-by-day serving clients. Lawyers and judges are really the working models of the rule of law. The lawyer is the leader in making sure that this ship of state goes forward.
What women did back in the 60s is they were teachers or nurses for the most part, or secretaries. And I thought I was going to be a teacher.
And I got a scholarship to go to grad school, and I decided to go to Harvard, and I was majoring in Chinese literature, and I thought I was going to get a PhD. And during my first year of doing that, I thought, I don't think so.
I was motivated to get additional education because my undergraduate degree from KU was in history and American studies, and I didn't want to be a secretary.
So I was really just looking around for what I could do. I didn't have any specific ideas about wanting to be a lawyer. Law school was a school I knew I could get into. I knew I wouldn't have to write a dissertation. I knew I wouldn't have to be in the education field, so I thought I would give it a try. It seemed like a good way to effectuate social change. That was part of it.
And I had to really rethink what I wanted to do. And so I met with a friend of mine who had gone to law school right after she graduated from college, and she was clerking for the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago, and she was working on some really interesting cases in about 1967, 68, dealing with free speech and contempt of court during the Vietnam demonstrations. And it sounded so relevant and so fascinating, and I thought, that's what I'd like to do.
One of the older professors there was a real curmudgeon, Roth and I were walking down the front steps of the law school. I don't know, I guess we were married by then. And this old professor looked at Roth and he said, "Keep that woman out of law school."
No, but even my mother, I had noticed when she was visiting with people, told them I was going to law school, would say, of course, she's not going to practice. She'll be in some firm or as a business, as an insurance company or a bank or someplace where she won't be out struggling in the child lawyer field.
No, you don't want to do that. And I said, why not? He said, well, frankly, the courtroom is a man's world. And he said, you would hate it. He says, you have a good mind. And he said, you would be miserable doing research for men attorneys or doing probate work in the back room, but you never see the inside of the courtroom. And he said, it's just not a place for women. I was just steaming by the time I got out.
My family's reaction was interesting. I'm the first one that went to college, much less anything further than that. And so my grandmother was just appalled. She just couldn't believe that I was going to keep going to school. My mother was supportive and I think pretty excited about it. And the rest of the family they just thought it was interesting that I would consider such a thing. My husband's grandmother maybe had the funniest response, because she asked me, what are days like at law school? And I described it to her. And at the end of that, what her question was, after I described going to classes and then doing this tremendous amount of reading, was, when do you do your baking and mending? I just thought, oh boy, that's a different era.
The first year of law school was very difficult because I had never had any connection with the law field, and so all the terminology was really difficult. I had a couple of teachers who were wonderful, and their door was always open. If I needed help, I was encouraged to come, and it was because of their attentiveness that I really was able to succeed.
All the time that I was in law school, there were only about 5 of us women there, and I didn't think anything of it because I had been around it so long.
I don't really remember being afraid until I started. And then I saw so many people that had lawyers in their family, knew the lingo, knew what was going on, and I felt completely like a fish out of water.
We learned quite a bit out on the steps of the law school. I mean, people had questions, we talked back and forth, and then you picked up and you understood some of the things better when they were discussed out there than you did in the classroom.
And I just felt like every day I was getting more powerful. And I love the subject matter. And I really love the way that I was forced to think so much more clearly than I'd ever been forced to think before. One example is my contracts professor asked me in class how I thought a particular dispute should come out and who should win. And I said, well, this party should win. And he said, why? And I said, well, because it's fair. And he said, why is it fair? You've got to go deeper. You know, what makes it fair? And nobody had ever asked me to do that kind of thing. Nobody had ever challenged me that much. And I so enjoyed being pushed to really think about why things should be the way they are. So I loved all of that.
I mean, I was doing things, I found out later, I was doing things as a law clerk that I had no business doing. But I assumed if they hadn't asked me to do it, if I wasn't supposed to know it, they wouldn't have asked me to do it.
I remember finishing quite well, and going, wow, I did that all by myself. And it gave me a sort of a confidence for the rest of my life. You know, if you can survive law school in 1971 to, 68 to 71, you can survive anything. So I remember that. I don't remember feeling unusual. I don't remember that. I felt like I was one of a few at the time, but I don't think I realized till years later how few it was. Because at that time, you just knew you were striking out in a new direction, but you didn't know the world would follow. And the world followed, and it was, it's so invigorating to see that.
First, I wrote a Supreme Court brief for the department, and they didn't put my name on the brief. They sent it over with the chiefs and so forth, and I just thought that's the way things had to be, so I didn't complain. But of all things, several of the Supreme Court justices found out that I not only wrote the brief, but I was the one that had made all the suggestions relative to its publishing, and they really came down on the head of the legal department of the State Highway Commission.
And you know, if anything, I think at the early side of women in the profession, there was so much curiosity and kind of excitement about it that maybe it was just the other way. I remember representing clients who wanted me because of my gender.
I had to testify in front of the legislature, like when Carson was about 3.5 years old. There's a picture of the kid up in one of those old windows in the old Capitol building. I've got him perched up sitting in a window so he couldn't run away and couldn't go anywhere, so that I could sit and testify in front of the legislature and then pick him up and take him out. But and somebody in the Capitol Journal got a picture of this kid sitting in the window.
Yeah, this was when I was an assistant city attorney. I was in front of the city council. I believe I was pregnant with one of my children, and they were. I was going over a smoking ordinance that the city council was thinking of passing, and smoking ordinances were still very, very controversial at that time. So they had opponents and proponents of the ordinance come up and speak before the city council, and an opponent of the ordinance got up and stated his opposition to the ordinance, and then said, and by the way, I think that Karen Arnoldberger over there ought to be home folding diapers where she belongs.
But when it came time in my career for me to step up and do more things on my own, the lawyers that I worked with were very anxious about letting women have responsibility in the courtroom. And so you take the normal stress of trying to represent a client, trying to impress a judge, trying to do everything you can, to win people over to your side, and you've got somebody pulling on your skirt and whispering in your ear and distracting you all the time. So it was stressful.
I was the first woman president of the state bar, and that was a change that was difficult for a lot of people to understand too. I'm not sure it was a sense of accomplishment. I enjoyed it. It was a fun time, and I was in a partnership with Jerry Palmer, and he was so supportive of the whole process, and so he didn't mind the time that I took away.
I'd have to say that I'm a bit proud of it. It has meant to me that I needed to uphold certain things that are important and give myself some responsibility for conducting myself and assisting others through the years, and I do have that feeling.
Being an attorney is me. I mean, it's the identity I wanted to have for myself when I was a child, and it's the identity I have for myself now. It's given me the ability to see problems that I may not have been able to see in the past and know how to get solutions to those problems. A legal education gives you a way of thinking about the world and viewing the world that I think is unique to any other profession, and analyzing problems. Again, I cannot imagine myself doing anything else, and I feel like just such a fortunate person to be able to be a lawyer, be a judge, and be a Kansas lawyer.